Hi there, it's Marzena. It's been a while since the last time I've made a cute fairy doll for my mom. Not that she didn't snatch majority of my dolls anyway, but it's been a while since I made one specifically for her. So let's make a cute little mouse fairy for my mom. Let's dive in. I went with the obvious and picked the Mouseetus King for the base. Thank you, Anna from the Bunny Act, for sending me this beauty. Because Mouseetus is a mouse, she already has rodent's teeth sculpted on, so less work for me. And it is always great if you can avoid sculpting on the face. So, ideal. Let's destroy her. Starting with her hair. It has to go. I used my sharpest scissors and cut the hair as close to the scalp as possible. Then I dunked her head down in a boiling hot water and I let her do her hot yoga for about 1 minute. After that, the head was soft enough to be safely removed from the body. Hair plugs and glue extraction came next. Last but not least, I removed the factory paint job with 100% acetone. With the head clean like this, I could start the shrinking process. You can learn more about that in my head shrinking tutorial. I find heads with animal ears harder to shrink in general. This mousie took me 5 soakings, and she's still way bigger than this 3 times soaked Cleo's head. But it is what it is. Still smaller than original, so let's move on. I started by cutting off her ears. From acrylic yarn I made the hair wefts in few shades of grey. But then it came to me that field mice are usually brown, so I fixed that. Also, this time I didn't smooth the yarn so it stayed fluffier. I painted the scalp with brown acrylics and fixed the paint job under a layer of watered down Mod Podge. I took my time and rerouted the whole head. Except for the ear holes, of course. I used shorter hair this time, with the exception of the portion of longer hair at the back. I widened the neck hole, which helped the glue to dry quicker. But before I poured it in the head, I covered the ear holes with tiny pieces of thermoplastic. I spread the glue evenly inside the head, trying to cover all the new hair plugs. And left the head for 2 days to dry. Time to put the head back on the body. To make it easier, I trimmed down the neck peg, slimmed down the neck, and I made the vinyl squishy again by heating it up with a hairdryer. When the vinyl cooled down, the shrunken head was again as hard as plastic. I turned my girl into a cozy burrito and sprayed her face with a layer of grey primer and 3 layers of Mr. Super Clear UV Cut Flat Varnish. The doll's natural color was far from what I wanted my mouse to be, hence the grey base. Finally, I could start the face up. I wanted my mouse to be brown, just like her hair, so I started with the brightest shade. It is always easier to add shades and darker colors onto lighter base than to make darker base lighter, especially with pastels and MSC that eats bright colors like it's been starving for days. This face-up gave me some hard times, not gonna lie. Mouseetus sculpt has very defined eyes area. That makes it always harder for me because my style consists of eyes way smaller than original. It is always tricky to work against the face mold and cover those areas where eyes should be, but now they are not. But to be fair, this whole mouse fairy project was one of those that I just wanted to get out of my head and be done with. Didn't feel too passionate about this concept, nor did I feel confident that it's gonna look decent in the end. I had the full design done a few years ago and I changed it drastically during this customizing process. The mood changed, the color scheme changed, the pose and the stand changed completely. I did everything to make this project work for me. It's just how it turns out sometimes. Majority of my projects really filled me with excitement from start to finish. I am passionate about my dolls, my ideas, and I love bringing them to life. Usually. Sometimes I have an idea for a concept and a vague vision of the design, but I know it's not strong, it's not solid. Sometimes I feel it's too simple, sometimes the opposite. It's there, waiting, taking up space in my head, because until I will make it, it will haunt me from time to time. I had that feeling with my butterfly meadow, I had it with my Medusa, and I had it with this little mousie. Not a project of passion, but still an idea with a bit of potential. A big unknown, you can say. I wanted this girl to be natural looking, no heavy makeup, cause she's a simple field mouse. A poor, hard-working fairy in my fairy world. But Mosida's eye mold was there to crush my dreams and spit right in my face. To cover the original face sculpt, I needed to add darker shading around the eyes and make her makeup way heavier than I anticipated. But I don't feel that bad about it. At least it did the trick and she still looks pretty cute. I know it's just the beginning of the spring when I'm making this doll, but I wanted the setting to be more autumn-like. A little bit rainy, a little bit cold, so I added a lot of blushing to her face. And a lot of freckles, cause you know I can't restrain myself from giving cute characters tons of freckles. I wanted to give her creamy eyelashes, but no matter what I did, they looked kinda out of place. So I settled for black. They are not that straight in your face, and she looks way better like this in my opinion. Teeny tiny dots of acrylic paint to create catch lights in the eyes, and the face up was done. Right away I felt better about this project, cause I believe this is the best face I have ever made. And here's comparison with another little sister type doll. The head was hard to shrink, but you can clearly see the difference. I also switched their right hands. Thank you, miss, for your cooperation. I cut out 2 sets of round-shaped pieces from Warbler thermoplastic for her new ears. From a twisted wire, I made a tiny attachment pieces and sandwiched them between bigger and smaller Warbler piece. Then I heated up my sculpting tool and blended the pieces together. I used the back end of a thickest brush to shape the ears. After that, I mixed some epoxy and sculpted the details. Time for our last resort, which is cutting my doll into pieces, which I started by cutting out the middle part of her torso. I cut off her right lower leg and removed her toes. Made some adjustments to knee and groin joints. And her right foot also had to go. For now. Some tweaks to extend the range of the movement in her left elbow, and I could remove the nasty plastic seams and sculpt it on panties. And it was time to give each piece a good sanding treatment. After that, I wiped the dust away and I used the Dremel tool to drill holes in each piece to connect them with wires later. I put a bit of aluminium foil in the tail hole and in the chest cavity, and I reconnected the torso pieces. I used thick wire and lots of hot glue, from which I built up the majority of her new stomach. I removed the foil from the tail hole and used hot glue to fill the bigger gaps on her butt. I reconnected the severed foot with the lower leg in the new proper position, but I left it separated from the rest of the doll just for now. Time for the first phase of the sculpting process. New stomach, new buttocks, new hips and groins. At some point, I acknowledged that our Mousita has a humongous backseat. I like big butts and I cannot lie, but this was a little too much for our tiny mouse. So I removed a bit of plastic from those areas to make the butt a bit more proportional and less preposterous. I covered the left knee joint and I let the epoxy cure overnight. On the next day, I gave our girl another sanding treatment. And you really want to be thorough with it. I rinsed the dust away, and when the doll was dry, the first phase of sculpting was done. The second phase was sculpting the feet. I started by adding 2 pieces of wire at the front of each foot. Then on top I sculpted the toes. As I mentioned before, this project evolved from completely different design, and the idea of how to approach her legs also changed a bit. At first I thought of giving her digitigrade legs, but those mean that the animal is walking on its toes, and I wasn't sure if that's the case with mice. I am not a mice expert, but I had pet rats when I was just a kid, and so I thought that giving her just more animalistic feet will suffice. I also sculpted some fur on the left ankle. Glued the arms in place and covered the tail hole because I came to the conclusion that I needed to be a little bit lower than it was originally. A little bit of sanding when those parts were cured, and it was time for the third phase of the sculpting process, which went as follows: covering the shoulders, elbows, and the wrist joints. adding fur to the right ankle, gluing the leg to the doll and covering the connection with epoxy. The fourth phase was the tail, but to get to that I needed the stand, or at least the mushrooms that our little girl was supposed to be chilling on. Started with a very thick wire as a base of our shrooms. First I created the basic shape of the stems from aluminium foil. If the foil slips from the wire, use thinner one as a retention. The foil bases I covered with liquid Sculpey as a bonding agent and with Super Sculpey as my clay of choice. After I got the foil covered, I textured the stems with a hard brush and created some indentations, like a snail or insect's bites. I put my stems into the oven for about 30 minutes, 130 degrees Celsius, and after they cooled down, I made the caps. Once again, I made the overall shape from aluminium foil and I covered it with clay using liquid Sculpey as a bonding agent. Amanita would be an obvious choice for a mushroom to make, but color-wise it would stick out like a sore thumb in the whole piece. So I went with a bolete. With that I could go back to my doll. I smoothed out the transitions from the last sculpting session, drilled the holes for the wings, and was ready for more sculpting. Before anyone say a word, she's a fairy, and all my fairies have wings. So, phase 4. First I had to drill a new hole for our tail. Then I took a long piece of wire and positioned it properly on the shrooms. I wrapped the main wire with a thinner one to give epoxy some retention. All I had to do now is cover the tail with epoxy, smooth everything with the help of water, and added some texture, similar to the texture you can find on actual rats' or mice's tails. I also used this sculpting phase to create the fur on our girl's chest, cause she was just lying there, chilling, wasting time. When the fourth phase cured, I wasn't too happy with the tail. It looked a little bit wonky and way too long in my opinion, so I made the tail 2.0 thinner and shorter. It still gave me more of a monkey-ish vibes, but it was good enough. Phase 5 was to attach the tail to our mousie's butt, and the phase 6, that I didn't record for some reason, was adding the fur over the base of the tail. And with that, all the parts of the mouse were done. But there was still one important element to make: the leaf. I wanted her to hold a leaf as an umbrella. I cut out the basic shape of the leaf from Warbler thermoplastic. Added a wire for the stem and midrib and sandwiched it with another piece of Warbler. The edges I blended with a heated up metal sculpting tool. I heated up parts of the leaf and shaped them carefully with my fingers. I heated up a poking tool and made 2 holes which I cleaned up with a scalpel. I mixed some epoxy and sculpted the veins, and I also made the midrib more visible. When both sides of the leaf were done and cured, it was time for the stem, or the petiole to be precise. Once again, I wrapped the main wire with a thin one and covered it with epoxy. When that cured, I gave my leaf a little sanding treatment. I was left with a bit of leftover epoxy after last sculpting, so I made this little cutie. I called him Bob. So, all the elements were finally sculpted. Our mouse, her ears, the leaf, 2 mushrooms, and our cute little addition, Bob. Time for painting and body blushing. Started by putting 4 layers of watered down Vicol glue on the warbler pieces to make the material smoother. Then I sprayed the doll's body and her ears with the same grey primer I used on her face. And similarly to the shading on the face, I started with lightest color, slowly building up the shadings with browns way up to the black. The hands and feet I blushed with pinkish tones. At first I also did that to the tail, but after scrolling through many mice photos, I decided to add more browns to it. I added blushing, painted her nails with a creamy white, and drew a lot of freckles with dark brown and white pencils. I also used watercolor pencils to add some highlights to the sculpted fur. When the body blushing was done, I removed the plastic wrap and I did some fixes to the neck area. That was all with the body, and it was time to jump into my least favorite part of the project, hairstyling. I am a very lousy hairdresser, and recording my messy hairstyling process is not easy, so let's make it quick. I wanted to give her a short hairdo with one longer strand at the back, just like a mouse tail. I started by cutting and shaping the hair at the back and slowly moved my way up until I reached the front hairline. Water, hair gel, and gallons of hairspray helped me tame the yarn. When the hairstyle was done, I glued in the ears and the wings that I made off camera. If you want to know how I made them, please watch some of my other fairy videos. I made many of those. With our mouse finally complete, let's paint the leaf. At first I wanted to do the paint job with the airbrush and acrylic paints, but I thinned down the paint too much and didn't have the patience for airbrushing. So I sprayed my leaf with 2 layers of MSC and blushed it with pan pastels. As a final touch, I drew a bunch of barely visible veins with pencils and voila! Here you go, little lady. Perfect. To the stand. I painted the mushroom caps with brown acrylics, gills with more of a yellow, and the stems with creamy ones. Sprayed the whole thing with MSC 2 times and created shadings with pastels. I finished my paint job with a layer of brown wash. Here are our shrooms, finally on their dedicated stand that I made from a wooden brick. I made few holes so I could glue in some longer blades of grass. I just kept them off from some fake flower bouquet that I own. Painted the wood brown and black. I didn't have time for kitty litter technique, but I still didn't want the ground to be too flat, so I glued few pieces of styrofoam here and there. I painted them brown so the grey wouldn't shine through and covered everything with a rough terrain paste mixed with brown acrylics. When it got completely dry, I added dark brown wash and later dry brushed some areas with lighter colors. Fixed everything under a layer of Liquitex gloss varnish. Of course, the mushroom caps also got a bit moist. Pretty nice, but not done yet. I decided to add a bit more texture and I sprinkled a bit of teeny tiny rocks, just here and there. It was time to glue the grass tufts, and I bought a bunch of them. Yes, they covered majority of the ground, but thanks to the fact it was painted, I didn't have to be worried about any of it peeking out from under the grass. So yeah, take your time, paint your ground. The stand was done. Our fairy was done. And the most important part, Bob was done. I put everything together with the help of super glue. And I used color shifting paint to create a shiny mucus trail under our friend Bob. All that was missing was a little snail's poop, but I decided to leave that detail out. But there was a little final touch that I still had to add. The raindrops. made from UV resin. I added many of those at the shrooms, on the grass blades, on our girl, her leaf umbrella, and a big drop in her hand. And with that little detail, she was finally done. I like how she turned out. I feel like along with her longer hair, she lost a bit of her cuteness, but despite that, I am happy with this mouse-like hairstyle. It makes her look more unique. I could make the leaf a bit bigger, but to be fair, there's only one thing that really bothers me in this project, and it's the height of the wooden base. I need to look for wooden plank that is not as thick as the one I have. Besides that, I am quite happy. I like her color scheme. I really like her face up. I love Bob. Overall, I enjoy working on this project way more than I thought I would. But of course, I would love to hear what are your thoughts. How do you like my little rodent fairy? Leave your comments down below. I always enjoy reading those, and I read them all. I hope my mom will like her new fairy. If you do, give this video a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to my channel with the bell to be notified about my future doll shenanigans. You can also follow me on Instagram or X, and if you wish to support me even further, you can buy me a virtual coffee at ko-fi.com. For now, thank you guys for watching and see you soon!
A najpiękniejsze zabawki są tu. Papinka. O. Słoneczko.